Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. This is the second discussion we are having on the Union Budget 2019-2020. Some of us were here for the first discussion, others have joined in. Today, what we plan to do, we have got with us Rathin Roy, who's Director NIPFP. He's the one who found that the numbers in the budget don't add up. And that, of course, has led to other revelations, which we shall come to later in the second half of the discussion. So, first, we have Rathin doing a presentation on the budget and why he thinks the numbers don't add up. And subsequently, we'll have a question answer session, or people, if they have a point of view, they're welcome to state it over here. Over to you, Rathin.
Thank you, Kanchan. Thank you, colleagues, for inviting me. This is the last thing I'm doing on the budget, so it's relaxing. I've done this now 5 times or more than that already across the country. So, the title is what I'm going to explain to you. It is my contention that India is going through the equivalent of a silent heart attack in fiscal terms. That we have been through a fiscal crisis in the last year, which the budget does not highlight. I want to say at the outset that there are no missing numbers. All the numbers I have are Government of India numbers. 90% of them are from the budget. 10% of them are from the economic survey. So there's no number fudging. Let me explain. So this year's budget speech was curious, right? The first one in my memory that had actually didn't mention the word fiscal once. And it's a budget. It talked about all sorts of things. Aadhaar, I don't remember. Nice things, good things. But it wasn't about the budget, as I understand it as a public finance guy. A budget is fundamentally a statement of the revenues and expenditures and borrowing plans of the government, embellished with other, things that the government says it will do. And those numbers were not even referred to once. I think this is hopefully the last time in my life that I will see a budget speech without the word fiscal in it, because I thought that was the point of the budget. So then at the end, the minister said, or was tasked to say, I think, that all the numbers are in the budget document. So I went to the budget documents, and one of the budget document that everyone looks at is something called Budget at a Glance. And the Budget at a Glance gives you the macro numbers. Macro numbers are normally presented in percentage of GDP because you want comparability. There is inflation, there are changes in structure, so GDP provides you comparability. What is the share of something in total national income? So macro numbers are pretty cool, actually. I don't want you to look at column 4. I'd like you please to look at 2014-15, 18-19 budget estimates, 18-19 revised estimates, 19-20 budget estimates, right? 18-19 is over, we are coming into 19-20 now. Now, I have been saying for some time that we have a interesting constraint on the central government, which is that since, actually this doesn't show it, but since about 1991, the central government has been shrinking. In 1991, the size of central government measured as total expenditure as percentage of GDP was about 21%. And it's been secularly shrinking since then. And that trend I noted continues. So if you look at the total expenditure in 14-15, it says 33.34% of GDP. And you'll find in 18-19 it comes down to 13. Then there's the aspiration to raise it, that never happens. So it's chugging along, losing 1/4, 1/3 of GDP every year. That's a separate set of issues, medium-term issues. But fiscal deficit bumping along at 3.3, 3.4. According to the FRBM, we should have been 3 by now. But we've all given up on that very quietly, and we won't embarrass the government by reminding them about it. So I'm cool. At least we're not at, more than 3.4. And the government continues its aspiration to keep it down. Tax GDP ratio, right? First column, look at that, 8.83. Nothing much happens. There's no action. Sorry, revenue receipts and tax. There's not much action on tax. You will find typically an aspiration and then a fall. And here I was very pleasantly surprised. The tax GDP ratio, they apparently met their tax targets. They wanted to collect 7.88% of GDP in the BE, and they collected 7.88. And then next year they said, actually, we are going to lower it slightly to 7.81. I said, this is very realistic. Good. And the same thing with revenue receipts. They met their target and they wanted to see a mild increase, chiefly through disinvestment and non-tax revenue. So fine. I write this column for the Business Standard. I said, today I'll be done by 6:30. Because of the unusually long speech, I only began writing it at 3 o'clock. Then I did something which, because I'm an old-fashioned public economist, which people have stopped doing since the economic survey became an event management document. The economic survey used to present the numbers on the Indian economy, chapter by chapter, and a commentary on these numbers. That's when the economic survey was a serious document. It still is. But the Chatterati don't look at volume 2 anymore. They only look at volume 1. Volume 1 is, people like me are trained to write volume 1. You go to a good school, or even a semi-good school, like some of them, you know how to write things. You know how to write regressions with 6 data points, put nice pictures, put nice graphs. If you don't know, your interns know better. So you get a bunch of interns and you find a couple of phrases, you go and meet your ad agency friend for a beer in the evening, and you bring out some Chakravyuha or something. But not serious, that's not serious economics. That is, that is grandstanding. And that's fine. But that's not my job. So I do look at chapter 2 of the economic survey. Volume 2. Volume 2, chapter 2 of the economic survey always is on the fiscal situation and presents numbers. And here's my shock. The numbers quoted in the economic survey, which is the 4th column, are completely different. Government figures, economic survey, from the numbers quoted in the budget. The 4th column. I'll explain why in a minute. Fiscal total expenditure has shrunk by almost 1% of GDP. Revenue receipts are down by more than 1% of GDP. The tax GDP ratio is down by more than 1% of GDP. That's a fiscal heart attack. It has never happened before, not even in 1991. And I still remember I got this cold, clammy feeling down my spine. I said, what is going on? It's 6:30, I have to crack this. Luckily, the economic survey, which is written by old-fashioned, Indian-educated, hardworking economic administrators, are trained to quote the source. And the source said, Controller General of Accounts, Ministry of Finance, Government of India. Accounts. So here's the mystery, cleared, for those who don't know. Our budget is normally presented on the 1st of February. On the 1st of February, the financial year has not ended. So you don't know what the final numbers are, because it ends on 31st March. So you present revised estimates. In April, you get the provisional accounts, which are then audited by the Controller and Auditor General. And then they become what are called accounts, which are presented in the next budget. We call them finance accounts. Those are accounts, they're not estimates. The English switch is very important. Bahi khata, as somebody said before this budget. Hai ye, CGA data. Bahi khata. Bahi khata should not normally differ so much from the revised estimates. I'm not going to comment on that except in the discussion. It never has, I've checked. Never has. I checked UPA that election. Not much difference. I checked 2009, not much difference. I checked 2004, not much difference. The worst I got was 0.12% of GDP overall difference in the numbers. That's all. Okay. I'm getting 1.2% of GDP. So just to give you a flavor of this, that translates for tax to a shortfall of 1,70,000 crores. 1,70,000 crores. And I'm not talking about the future. I'm saying, according to the Controller General of Accounts, the government of India collected 1,70,000 crores, less than it said it would, when it presented the budget and in the revised estimates of the interim budget, which were carried forward here. These numbers, therefore, are indisputable. They cannot be a dispute because they are Ministry of Finance numbers. And the Department of Economic Affairs produces the budget, the economic survey, and the Department of Economic Affairs produces the budget of the Government of India. So it's not business as usual. Okay? It's not business as usual. This repeats what I've told you. But the interesting thing is that despite a shortfall of 1,70,000 crores or 1.2% of GDP in the budget, in the revenues, how do you make that up? You borrow less, or you spend less, or both. Nothing else you can do. Sorry, you borrow more. So the fiscal deficit number is the only number that is common between the revised estimates, look, 3.4, 3.4, and the RE, and the accounts. Which means, and these are accounts, so this actually happened, that the government of India cut its expenditure, well, not quite by 1,70,000 crores, but according to the economic survey, about 1,45,000, 1,50,000 crores. And that's because the economic survey assumes a 1% higher growth rate of GDP, the denominator, than does the budget. And therefore, they sort of explained away the remaining 20,000. But let's take it at face value. 1,40,000 crores is a lot of money. Now, my question is, what did you cut? It's a lot of money. Did you cut defense? Did you cut railways? Did you cut Narega? Did you cut Pradhan Mantri something? Did you cut Deen Dayal Upadhyay something? Did you cut any other names? Something, you know? Huh? Atal Bihari Vajpayee something. All these things are very important politically. And you are cutting in an election year, as it happens, but never mind that now. So it's not business as usual. For the first time in my life, I'm seeing a situation where the difference between something presented in February and something presented in July is so great that we have lost 1,70,000 crores in tax revenue. Our revenue performance, therefore, last year has been dismal. Unprecedentedly dismal. At least in my working life, which I would date from about 1988. I have never seen such a dismal revenue performance, and I'll tell you why it happened. And obviously, if the government has been cutting 0.85% of GDP in expenditure, this is going to have huge macroeconomic consequences because you're running essentially then an austerity budget in circumstances when you require fiscal expansion. And the political authorities do not know that in effect you run an austerity budget. Or if they did, I'd like them to tell me, but they haven't. So I presume, well, I hope that let me put it diplomatically, the contours of this crisis were not immediately apparent to the political authorities, in my view. But the problem does not end there because next year, this was looking really cool. Total expenditure will go up, look at RE and BE, from 1304 to 13.2. Revenue receipts will go up mildly, all very manageable, 0.212% of GDP. That is approximately 17,000, 18,000 crores they're looking for extra, right? But now, if you're going to raise total expenditure by 1,70,000 crores, you're going to have to raise the tax GDP ratio from 6.9 to 7.8 by another 1,70,000 crores. Actually, GDP will go up a little more than that, about 2 lakh crores. I can tell you professionally, you cannot do that in 1 year. You cannot. When I tell you how the shortfall happened, it's apparent. So now we are caught in a vicious cycle where we have underestimated revenue and cut expenditure, and in next year's budget, you have overestimated, you continue to overestimate revenue because you know your revenue is underestimated, and therefore you'll have to cut expenditure again by the same amount. So your austerity will continue because you are saying you will not borrow more. तो कहीं तो वादा तोड़ोगे. You will either borrow more or you will have austerity. Because what you will not have, I know in India, everyone wants a dream situation, otherwise you're a professional pessimist, is a 1,70,000 to 2 lakh crore rise in the tax GDP ratio on the basis of the tax proposals laid out in Parliament by the minister. Those tax proposals will not give you 1.1%, and the proof is here. She's actually expecting the tax GDP ratio to go down. Okay. So this is for absorption. What is the reason for this shortfall? And I'm almost done. I have one more big bombshell to give you, but not bombshell. I have one more interesting conundrum to bring to your attention. I beg your pardon. Please edit that. And then, right. The problem with the tax GDP, the tax shortfall was about 85% of it was because of GST. 15% was because of personal income tax. And personal income tax, we have been playing Pied Piper saying we are so efficient with apps that we are good at collecting more. And we have been loading the tax department with unrealistic targets while saying you can't scrutinize more than 0.5% of the returns. Anyway, so we have been overestimating personal income tax mildly every year. You know, Apeksha Arman. But you don't run government through Apeksha Arman, you run from the head. And the head was being seduced by promises that have not been kept on personal income tax. What about GST? Well, I'll tell you what happened with GST. When I came back to this country to head my institution, we had been tasked by the government of India, by the Impart Committee actually, to find out the revenue neutral rate. My colleagues came up with a number of 26 to 28% with a dual rate system, where the rate on which would have. Why? Very simple. When we had a system of excise duties, let's say that I had to make this table. I would buy the wood, I'd pay excise on it. Wood plus excise, I'd varnish, I'd pay excise on wood plus varnish, right? Plus excise plus varnish plus excise. Then when I built the table, I would pay excise on the gum, I would pay excise on many things, right? And then I would bring it all together, and when I sold it, I would finally pay an excise. That's called cascading. And the reason why we wanted a GST is to eliminate cascading. Now, I'd go by definition, and the median excise rate then was, we estimated something between, not me, my colleagues, 30 to 32%. So then it's a no-brainer, boss, that if you want a revenue neutral rate, it is going to have to be something close to that. And so we said it's something, we said minimum 25 hoga, maximum 28, depending on what you bring into GST, what your rate structure is. And the government did what all governments do. We don't want to know this is bad news. We want you to tell us that magically the GST will be revenue neutral at an 18% rate. I said, we don't think that your estimates are credible. I said to them, I have no dog in this fight. I've just come back after 24 years to India. I've looked at these numbers, and it's my professional judgment that they're accurate. We might quibble about a percentage or two, but it's certainly not 18. Not with the GST you're implementing. No. And then we had a chief economic advisor who came and wrote a nice paper with lots of 6-point regressions, which said, 18 is fine, we'll just put a tax on gold and everything will be okay. So ladies, and then of course, we also had to agree to compensate the states for their loss in GST. So the center bore the full brunt. And there you have it. I'm afraid we're not in school anymore. These things happen. चॉकलेट खाओगे पेट खराब होगा नहीं चॉकलेट खाऊंगा पेट नहीं खराब होगा जीएसटी लाओगे रेवेन्यू न्यूट्रल नहीं होगा विदाउट अ हाई रेट बिकॉज पहले आपका हाई रेट था there's been a huge diminution, of course, in the tax burden now as a consequence, which is good. But the fiscal point is you will lose money, and we have lost money. No point pretending it's all happened because the app didn't work. That has been the received wisdom. The app didn't work properly. We didn't train people. App will solve everything. It's called GSTN, by the way. We'll create a company in AeroCity. That AeroCity company will solve everything. Our excise inspectors will miraculously become GST collectors. Problem is they don't know how to collect. Returns are very complex. No, that may all be true, but the bottom arithmetic point is you have imposed GST at a rate which is not revenue neutral, and in large measure, it is by submission that the shortfall is a consequence of that, and that's a much harder story to correct with an app. Okay, because your tax rate times your tax total activity times number of taxpayers equals the tax you collect. If you lower the tax rate, if the other two are constant, and you don't fantasize GST will bring more people in to pay tax, that kind of thing. If I send Rathin Roy a message saying, thank you for being a good taxpayer, here's a Singh silver medal, he will pay more tax. Doesn't work that way. I don't pay taxes that I won't be caught paying, So there you are. One of the consequences of this, I'll be very quick with this, is that the centre's tendency to steal fiscal space, which has been happening for a while, has been exacerbated. So the share of central sector schemes as usual increases. It was 9% last year, then it became 10, now it's 13, at the expense of the states. But not entirely. They said they'll do three things. The first thing they said they'll do is reduce the share of subsidies. I will make a comment and leave it there for questioning, by which they mean, at a very minimum, that if there are subsidies, they will not be financed from the Consolidated Fund of India at this time. Okay, I'll leave it there. Finance Commission transfers, that's legit actually. I don't know why people are getting into a twist, getting agitated about this. Because when a Finance Commission comes to the end of its award, the grants and all that, they taper off. So last year, normally transfers go down. And the state share of central taxes. This has been happening since 2000 and since the 14 Finance Commission. The central government imposes a cess. In our constitution, cesses are not shareable with the states. And therefore, instead of the divisible pool being 42%, as recommended by the Finance Commission, it has gone down steadily every year of this government. From 42, it went down to 35, 36, 35, now it's close to 32. Okay, because all taxation, incremental taxation, they say, Swachh Bharat cess, Chhatrapati Shivaji cess, I don't know what cess, but some cess. And that is not shareable. Yeah, and this summarizes what I say about GST. And of course, what the finance minister has done is very good. She has proposed important simplifying reforms which should help the efficiency of GST collection. But since I'm asserting that the GST is not revenue neutral, that is at best going to be a palliative, not a solution. So I expect this hole to stay in substantial measure. Let's not talk about this. This is over. Oh, I didn't bring those slides. I didn't bring those slides for a reason. I'll tell you orally and stop. Okay.
Now can you switch to him, away from the... You're done with the screen?
Yes, we are. Because I didn't bring those slides.
Now to him.
I thought I had those slides. I told her to give me... Never mind. Maybe I have them here. No, I don't. But I'll tell you orally. It's very simple. Please switch that off because this is over now. This is not relevant.
So we can leave that over there.
But it's not relevant anymore. Ho gaya.
No, but let
Okay.
just talk.
Okay. So when I was preparing for my 5 institutions seminar last week, I said I have to say something new. I've been saying this in the country all week. It's been reported in the press, in Parliament. They're waving my article. So I looked at the budget again, and thanks to some very good interesting, but the source is very important. I looked at the expenditure profile of the Government of India, which is part of the budget documents. Statement 27 of that profile, unlike the rest of the budget, used the actual numbers. The only statement in the budget that I looked for now. That statement said, extra budgetary borrowings of the Government of India. And they slated those to be at 67,000 crores last year and 57,000 crores next year. The statement of liabilities of the Government of India in the receipts budget, which tells you what the liabilities are, some good civil servant and public-spirited soul attached an asterisk at the bottom of it and said this does not include the extra budgetary borrowings reflected in Statement 27 in the expenditure budget. Because nothing, not included. So these do not form part of your calculation of the fiscal deficit and they do not form part of the calculation of the debt. And then the medium-term fiscal statement of the Government of India, which is another budget document, said, we have decided to do this. And we are going to do it for 5 years and then stop. But in those 5 years, the public debt of the Government of India and the fiscal deficit, these liabilities will not be counted. It's a kind of doing what is that scheme that Piyush Goyal did for the power sector? Uday. It's like doing an Uday in the central budget. None of this was in the budget at a glance. None of this was in the finance bill. I beg your pardon. None of this was in the finance minister's speech. And I would urge you, I should tell you something, which maybe you don't know. The finance minister's speech is very important because the speech is paragraphed and every paragraph requires an action taken. So any statement of policy has to be there, such as paragraph 103. If you have decided to take on extra budgetary liabilities and you're putting that in the budget and you're saying these will not form part of his public debt, that has to be in the finance minister's speech, in my opinion, because you have made a policy announcement. It was not. So we have a silent fiscal crisis. We have, until very recently, in my view, a government that did not appreciate fully its dimensions. The dimensions are large. It is not a one-off. And recourse is being taken to things that are destroying steadily but surely the integrity and credibility of the budget. Unless we grow up and acknowledge this, and I have proposed, therefore, that we need to say that, okay, we have a problem, we cannot solve it in 1 year. Let's come out with a medium-term 3 to 5 year fiscal roadmap, which tells us how we fix this problem. Because otherwise, nobody's going to be happy. Your spending plans will not fructify. You will constantly be frustrated at the lack of taxes, and you will force the tax department to resort to things that will put off the citizen. And you may have to borrow more, and who knows, even from foreigners. Thank you.